So let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
Listen, if we go into Election Day within a certain number of points, we're going to win this thing. In 2021, I beat Phil Murphy on Election Day in-person voting by 250,000.
So they are expected, Republicans usually do better on Election Day, but what about early voting? New Jersey, Virginia, and New York City all seeing voting surges as it becomes clear the best chance for an upset is in New Jersey as Jack Chitterelli sees a pathway to victory.
Number 2.
It appears to most reasonable observers that Donald Trump was punked on the world stage by the Chinese Communist Party. It was all a show.
What's he even talking about? It's just incredible. Trump trip in review. Why Dems can't seem to even why Dems can't seem to just take a minute and give credit where credit's due. The lack of respect even lets their voters know that there's no sense even paying attention, and I think it's bad for the country.
Number 1.
It's actually the far left side of the Democratic Party because, to their great credit, 3 moderate Democrats joined 52 Senate Republicans to vote to reopen the government.
There you go. J.D. Vance, shutdown day 31. They're not even talking talking to each other, too, as President Trump says, blow up the filibuster and get back to work. Have we reached that point? I'm not for that, but would they get the votes even? So many Republicans are against that. We discussed the fury and the pain by Americans and their vital industries. And let's bring in Jason Riley to discuss that. Jason, first off, I don't see the shutdown ending anytime soon unless we just watch the Democrats cave because Republicans are not budging. They feel the clean CR, which 4 major airlines are all calling to pass and 2 major unions have all said should be just signed and passed, is just sitting out there.
I don't think the Republicans should give in, Brian. I think they're in a very strong position here. This is all about Obamacare. It's about health insurance and these subsidies. These subsidies that, as you know, were always meant to be temporary. They were put in place due to the pandemic, the increase in the subsidies. And the Democrats want to keep them at this elevated level, even though the pandemic is over. And I think the opportunity here is for Republicans to show the flaws in Obamacare, how it doesn't work, how it's made healthcare more expensive. And the Democrats have to own this. Republicans did not vote to increase these subsidies. Democrats did. They need to own it. So I hope the Republicans stick together here. I think they have a very strong argument and a chance here to explain to the American people all the problems with Obamacare.
So the problem is, though, I saw a CNN poll that shows more people blame Democrats, but I just see this Washington Post poll showed you huge disparity. 45-33, they blame Republicans over Democrats. It was 47-30 October 1st. Now here we are on the threshold of November 1st, and it's 45-33. Now, I don't love the polling. I mean, I can't see, I don't understand it, but that's pretty stark.
Well, you have to remember, as you know, being in the media like me, what the Democrats have is not only the arguments they're putting out there, but they have the media on their side, basically repeating their talking points about whose fault this is and how much damage will be done or not done and so forth. So I think you see a little bit of that being reflected in the polling as well. The Democrats have always had that going for them, which is most of the mainstream media taking their side. And so it's really a 2-on-1 fight.
Here's Hakeem Jeffries, cut 1.
But these are extremists who are willing to actually starve their own folks. One of the 5 states that would be most impacted if SNAP benefits are cut off is Louisiana, the home state of both Speaker Mike Johnson and Majority Leader Steve Scalise, but they could care less.
So he wants to couch it as President shouldn't have made the trip. He said that he was punked on the world stage. I don't even know what that term means. And then he is continuing to just throw out rhetoric time after time. So he is not dealing. Schumer's not dealing. And I don't even hear about people underneath these guys dealing.
I think they will have to deal. If the Republicans can stick together, I think the Democrats will have to cave. I really believe that some of the special interests you mentioned on the Democrat side, particularly big labor, is now pressing them to cave. And I don't know how long the Democratic Party can go crosswise with big labor. You know how much they depend on the unions to help them turn out the vote, to help them get out their message. So leaders like Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, I think, eventually will have to listen to those special interests.
We're losing between $7 and $14 billion. It's getting pretty costly, and people got to their SNAP and all these other things in their pay is just being withheld, and it's really causing stress around the country. Let's talk about the New Jersey election. Jack Ciattarelli, we know that he had a town hall last night. We know that he got very close last time, and he defied the polls in doing so. He says he knows exactly what he's going to do, and he feels as though this thing is tilting in his direction. Cut 12.
Our internal polling in 21 said that we had a real shot. This time, the internal polling says a whole lot better. But listen, all I can tell you is wherever I go around the state, the energy is electric. The reception in minority communities has been overwhelmingly positive. And when Democratic mayors across this state are endorsing the Republican nominee, it tells you we're on to something.
But the Fox News poll shows Cheryl still ahead of Ciattarelli, 52-45. And when you break down the poll and find out what people care about on crime, they think Ciattarelli's better. Cost of living, they actually think Mikey Sherrill's better. Energy, you think Ciattarelli would run away with it. It's 54-44. So it makes me question this whole poll.
I'm with you. And I think Ciattarelli is right about last time. He really did overperform the polling. And so I think he's right to be skeptical. I don't think that's spin. He came very, very close. None of the polls saw him coming that close. And so if he thinks, hey, add some points to whatever this poll says I have based on his experience last time, I think we should take him on his word at that. That's not to say he's going to win, Brian, but I think this is almost a toss-up. I think it's going to be a much closer race than these polls are predicting right now. And I think he's run a very, very strong campaign. I listened to his debates. I watched him put out his message. I think Mikey Sherrill's hasn't been a particularly strong candidate. I think she's sort of running on her biography, which I understand, the military background in that, and he's trying to undermine some of that. But, I think she's running, I don't think she's done a very good job of articulating what she would do. She's just kind of put a Trump mask on her opponent and thinks that'll be enough to get her over the finish line. And I'm not sure that it will.
So I want to bring you to your column of Wall Street Journal, and the Supreme Court's going to take up segregated political maps. Tell us what that has to do with the 1965 civil rights reform.
Well, there were some temporary provisions that were put into the 1965 Voting Rights Act, and the argument is whether those provisions are now outdated. And one of them allowed for racially based gerrymandering on the presumption that white voters wouldn't vote for black candidates. So you had to create congressional districts with black candidates so that black voters would choose their candidate who looks like them. I think that's absurd right now. We're a majority white country. We've elected a black man president twice. I think that tells you something about whether white people will vote for a black candidate. I also know that most of the Congressional Black Caucus does not represent districts that are mostly black, and yet they continue to win elections. All black people don't have the same political interest. Poor blacks versus wealthier blacks, less educated blacks versus more educated blacks, rural versus urban. These racially gerrymandered districts just ignore all of that and think this should all be based on skin color. So I understand political map drawing. You're not going to take the politics out of that. But I think what the Supreme Court can do is take the racial aspect out of that. These maps should not be drawn along racial lines. I think that's something that is no longer necessary in this country, if it ever was.
So if they agree with you, the conservative Supreme Court majority, what changes? How does that change? Do people do all 50 states look at their maps from a different lens?
Yeah, what it means is that racial gerrymandering maps violate the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. So if states are drawing maps with too much emphasis on race, they get thrown out. The court won't approve them, or they can be challenged in court and are likely to be struck down. So that's what it means. Right now, people can take race into account and draw maps and say, hey, we have to take race into account because of the Voting Rights Act. The Supreme Court could say you can no longer use that excuse.
Well, that's a relief. So check out his column, the Wall Street Journal. And Jason, as you look at the president's trip, 5 days, Malaysia, rare earth deal, Then they talk about he officially signs off a peace deal with Cambodia. And then he goes over to Japan, establishes a relationship with the prime minister there. They iron out and sign a $550 billion, including in it is $550 billion worth of investment here. And then he goes to South Korea, where all these countries, more defense, sign their trade deal, but they're meeting with President Xi, culminating there. The president says, I'll give that meeting a 12 out of 10. What do you think of the trip? What do you think of the meeting?
I think it lowered the temperature, which is a good thing. China made some concessions. It's going to resume the rare earths mineral exports, but only for a year, Brian. Let's keep that in mind. They're still going to have that leverage after a year from now. Trump wants some relief for the U.S. farmers. China's going to resume buying our soybeans, which is what Trump wanted. That was a big win for him. And of course, he wants some concessions on the fentanyl trafficking that we all know about, although I'm not sure, whether or how China will do any more to crack down on that, and then how we would verify it even if they did. But he did get some concessions on that. But the bottom line here is that trade wars are hard to win. I think Trump somewhat underestimated how hard China would push back. But at the same time, we did lower the temperature. This gets us back to where we were, I think, in maybe May, and we'll go from here. But this is the best part of this whole trip for me is what you mentioned on South Korea, letting them build nuclear submarines, which is a way to contain China. And we should be doing more of that, not only with respect to South Korea, but other leaders in the area, such as Japan. So I think that is another positive aspect of this overseas trip.
I want you here with the Treasury Secretary, who's really set the table for all these deals, had to say about it. Cut 40.
My guess is a year from now we'll be back at the table, and we'll get another delay, another roll, because what everyone misses is the Chinese have rare earths, but we have President Trump's threat on tariffs. He gave the team maximum negotiating leverage when, within 24 hours of the Chinese announcing the potential export controls, he said, if this happens, I will raise the tariffs on China 100%, which is, in essence, an embargo. And the U.S., we are the deficit country. China has to export to us.
So he's seeing progress.
Oh, yeah, there is progress. But again, he pointed, it's only for a year. And then we're back at the table again. The one thing that I wish Trump had pushed, Brian, more is on the oil issue. China buying Russian oil, which allows Russia to finance the Ukraine war. I would have liked to see the president push Xi more on that issue. He didn't do it, but we'll see. But he did get some concessions, and I think those are worth celebrating. There's something. But again, we could be right back here again a year from now because of those rare earths, the rare earths mineral situation.
My hope is we're doing some deals with Australia, Cambodia, Malaysia, hopefully Argentina, doing our own mining and refining, and hopefully we'll be less dependent on them a year from now. Sometimes it's been speculated we can probably be independent from them in 18 months, which if we focus on it, warp speed style, Manhattan Project style, and it should be that type of urgency, along with getting our pharmaceuticals out of there. It'll give us a lot more leverage. Jason, thanks so much.
Thank you, Brian.
They're in their fourth year of the war. They haven't taken a major city since 22. They've gained 0.6% in the last year. They're taking over 1,000 casualties a year. This last offensive has failed to accomplish any of its objectives. Their economy is tanking, and now they're getting sanctions imposed on them. And also, President Trump is upgunning Ukraine militarily.
Yeah, I wish it would be quicker, and I wish we didn't pull troops out of Eastern Europe. Even if that was the plan, it just sends the wrong signal. Fabian Hofmann joins us now. Fabian, your thought about General Keene's assessment of the situation there?
Yeah, spot on pretty much, I guess. Russia is bogged down in Ukraine. It's really difficult for them to make progress. They're losing a tremendous amount of manpower and material. Obviously, also heavy losses on the Ukrainian side, but by and large, this is a quagmire for Russia, and they're getting punished hard.
Do they know it? Do they feel as though they're winning? Do you think? I don't know if I have to give them sodium pentothal because we're not going to get a true read. But what do you think?
It's a difficult question, right? I think by and large in Russian society, they're understanding that this war is not going the way that they expected it to go, that they wanted to go. We obviously don't know what exactly the Russian decision makers think. We have a pretty good understanding that Putin is most likely not getting proper assessments from the front line, so he's getting a much more rosy picture than is actually the case. But I think by and large, even within the decision-making cadre, they're probably quite unhappy as things are progressing.
How much could China control this? Are you disappointed the president didn't bring that up, or would you think it would have been fruitless for them to say, stop aiding Russia?
Yeah, I mean, China has a massive influence on what's going on because it's the number one supporter of Russia. And without this level of Chinese support, it would be extremely difficult for Russia to continue this war, at least at this pace, right? And obviously, Russia also, they still believe they're sitting, they have more energy to stay in this fight than Ukraine and the West. And I think without Chinese support, it would be pretty clear also to Russia that they could not maintain their lines. So I think, yeah, China plays a massive role, and any pressure that we can mount on China to lower its level of aid to Russia, that is extremely helpful to Ukraine and the West.
So how do you feel it's being interpreted with the president pulling troops out of some countries in Eastern Europe?
In my assessment here from Europe, obviously, it's not great. European allies, they would prefer a very strong, a very committed United States to these European countries. I think from a deterrence posture perspective, it's obviously not a great look when you're withdrawing men from the front line, so to speak, right, from the frontline countries in NATO. That sends the wrong signal, and so there's obviously then hope that in other areas aid will be expanded.
Yeah, so you talk about Europe needs their own offensive capabilities to really get Russia's attention.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if you look at European procurement over the last couple of years, what you see, for example, is that massive amounts of money have flown into missile defense. That's not bad by and large. Obviously, there was a big capability gap that needs to be filled. But where European states are massively lagging behind is a counter-strike capability, their own cruise missiles, their own ballistic missiles, their own long-range drones. These are capabilities that are not acquired in sufficient numbers. And in the end, right, you have to threaten what Ukraine is doing right now. You have to threaten Russia that if they were to attack Europe, it would tremendously hurt. And from day one, they would receive the punishment back in their own country.
No doubt about it. And do you think they get the message, Fabian? I mean, we hear about them spending more. We hear that, the Russians are breaching their airspace. They don't need us anymore to say Russia's a real threat. Do you think they're getting the message and have the political will to do that?
So they're definitely getting a message. Political will, that's a different question, right? As you know, economies in Europe are slowing down. At the same time, you need to drastically expand defense spending. That's a difficult compromise. It's a difficult sell to the populations. You have leaders in power, some more, some less, that are really trying to sell that idea that right now defense is the number one priority and are willing to make those investments. But obviously it's not easy. And if you ask me, no, things are not going as fast as they should.
Yeah, but they'd be buying weapons for us. We got to make them quicker. And I think that's part of it. Your assessment of this new nuclear-powered Poseidon, I guess, drone that is supposed to be able to ignite a radiation-filled tidal wave to wipe out countries. Is that the premise of this?
So yeah, you have these bunch of nuclear wonder weapons, right? Like these new capabilities that were announced some 7 to 8 years ago by Putin, among them Poseidon, among them Burevestnik, right? This nuclear-powered nuclear cruise missile that we also saw a couple of days ago being tested. By and large, I would say these nuclear capabilities, they don't matter. I mean, if you look at the Russian ICBM arsenal, their submarine-launched ballistic missile arsenal, that's pretty sizable, that's pretty robust. I don't think Russia needs these new capabilities necessarily to guarantee it's a short-second strike capability. So I think this is really, for signaling purposes. This is about sending this message to the United States, to Europe, to the West by and large, that Russia is able to innovate also in the nuclear space and to expand the threat horizon. But I think, on a material level, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, and you bring up with Ukraine, you said, what happened to their missile defense? And why is so much getting through? Is it because they're swarming drones and Patriots are built for rockets to knock down missiles?
So there are a couple of reasons. Patriot is still performing pretty well from what I'm hearing inside Ukraine. But Russia has taken measures, right? They have adapted their missile systems at a software level, basically adapting the trajectory to make it a bit more difficult for Patriot to intercept incoming ballistic missiles. And then another reason may simply be that Russia is now increasingly targeting areas that are not covered by Patriot missile launchers. And obviously, if you have no Patriot in place, you also cannot intercept any incoming missiles with those weapons. So that means, right, Ukraine, first and foremost, they need more missile defense capabilities to defend a larger area of their country.
All right, so let's talk about Venezuela. We've blown up about a dozen little boats, drug boats. And now the Wall Street Journal has today a story that we are looking at military targets inside Venezuela. Here's General Jack Keane on that, cut 45.
Clearly, bringing an aircraft carrier into this is clearly a demonstration of force. I've always said, as an Army guy, the symbol of American military superiority is an aircraft carrier. If you had to pick one thing, that is it. And we're bringing that there. Obviously, it has fighters on board that can do damage on land to Maduro's drug labs and other things that are supporting the narco trafficking that he's doing. Narco trafficking and his government have become one and the same because he's taking the revenue from it. That's unprecedented throughout Latin America in the collusion that's taken place there. And that's why the pressure is.
Pretty amazing. So your thoughts?
In the end, it's up to the American people and the American president how they want to allocate their
But the
resources.
focus. You have this renegade country, a brutal dictatorship, a guy that just lost 70-30 in an election again, and then you have them allowing Iran, Russia, and China to really do whatever they want in that country, which is not in our interests.
Yeah, if that's the assessment, right, on the American side, it's a threat to national security. Then obviously you have every right to allocate these capabilities as you please. And if that's going after Venezuela, that's certainly within the scope of possibilities.
So let's talk about Hungary. They're going to be coming here. The leader is going to be coming here November 6th. They're pretty much buying Russian oil. And they said, hey, we're landlocked. We have to. We have them, and Spain doesn't seem to be particularly motivated to help out.
Yeah, you had other countries, right, in Europe also they were both landlocked and totally dependent on Russian oil or gas, and they managed to get rid of it and to separate that line between their country and Russia. And in the end, it's a question of political will. And very clearly, Hungary does not want to separate its ties to Russia because for some reason it still perceives Russia as an ally. And that's really, really difficult, right? Also from a consensus perspective, because in Europe, both within the European Union as in NATO, a lot happens with consensus decisions. And if you then have a Hungary that constantly goes against what is needed, that does not make anything easier.
So are you for unfreezing the funds that are in Belgium of Russians and giving it to Ukraine?
At the very least, we need to mobilize those financial resources to a greater extent. I'm not a legal expert. I'm not an economic expert. I don't know exactly how you would do it, through which frameworks. But it seems pretty clear to me that you have a lot of possibilities there. And as Europe, as the West, as Ukraine is struggling with mobilizing financial resources, we should definitely make use of this money to a greater extent that we're currently doing.
No question. Thanks so much. Fabian Hofmann, appreciate it. Thanks for Zooming with us. And you can catch Fabian's show. We'll post that on YouTube. Brian Kilmeade Show. Don't forget, Sunday at 10 o'clock is One Nation. Great roster of guests, including Elise Stefanik's going to be with us. Jack Chittarelli's going to be with us, as well as Carl Rove. So don't miss it. 10 o'clock, Sunday, Eastern Time, that is, on Fox News Channel. Pierre, welcome.
Thanks, Brian.
So your thoughts, economically, how are people paying the price for the shutdown? Have you felt it at all, being that you're mostly private sector?
No, private sector hasn't felt it whatsoever. I mean, I haven't seen any cause for concern in real estate. I haven't seen any cause for concern in people willing to transact. If anything, during the shutdown, the stock market probably hit a couple record highs during that time.
Yeah.
And the liquidity and, the 2 rate cuts that we've had in the fall supersede any aspect for real estate in comparison to government shutdown.
And the projected, what's going to be around the corner, the big, beautiful bill passed. So that's going to be in play. We're still on Biden's level of spending. So I don't know what's going on. I'll tell you one thing that would maybe indirectly hurt you, and that is healthcare, because that is a major expense for the average American. And Obamacare has not worked out. That does decide, what do I have enough money to move to a bigger house, a bigger apartment?
Yeah, of course. When you take in consideration health insurance, which is astronomically high. I mean, I own a small business. We pay health insurance for a number of employees. I mean, the bill since Obamacare has gone up probably at least 5x. So it's been a huge burden. But even for your average American, if their proportionate share of their premiums it continues to rise in this manner, it's going to affect every aspect of their cost of living.
So let's talk about the mayor's race right here in New York City. It looks like the latest poll still has Cuomo far away. He's picking up a point or two here. Curtis has got 15, Cuomo 33, and you got Mondami, depending on the poll, 43 or 47. What worries you most about a Mondami win?
There's 2 things. Number one, I'm going to go with the radical beliefs with respect to the police. The sentiment of defund the police has proven to be a horrible, horrible idea for New York City. When you go back to when we had bail reform in New York City passed in Albany, and then you go back to when de Blasio, when George Floyd passed away or was killed, de Blasio defunded the NYPD $1 billion. I don't know why a heinous act that takes place in the Midwest would result in the NYPD paying a price here in New York City. But the end result was crime went up 50%. 50%. So I always say, you have to look at what policies you've passed previously and what the results were. Bottom line was that was a colossal failure. So if we keep going with this horrific belligerent rhetoric of defund the police and bail reform and all these things, it's just going to get worse. And this city can't afford to have more crime. One of the 2 good things Mayor Adams did, he got that number down. He knocked that number down by probably close to half. That's a trajectory we need to go. We don't need to go backwards. De Blasio and this lunacy put New York City back 10 years with this stuff.
But the thing is, it was Governor Cuomo that put together the no cash bail, right?
Of course.
It was de Blasio that wanted to close Rikers. So we're not going to put anyone in jail if I'm trying to close the place.
Right.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I want you to hear what Jason Chaffetz said. Okay, I get it. Yeah, he comes to New York all the time now from another country, from another state, but said this, cut 27.
That's a motley crew, but boy, you start to see the Democrats going after him and supporting him out loud. I mean, those policies that he's advocating are some of the most radical lurch to the left we have ever seen in this country. It is a scary prospect. It is all about voter turnout, just as it is in Virginia, just as it is in New Jersey. But boy, what a motley crew. You elect some of those yahoos, this country's in trouble.
Well, Cuomo, they seem to be the best option, being that Curtis knows it, as a Republican, you're not going to win in New York these days. Mm-hmm. Do you think Cuomo's a better option?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Cuomo, I'm so disappointed in Curtis for not dropping out. Everybody needs to be backing Cuomo. He has his flaws. I'm not a fan of his whatsoever. Sadly, this is an election of voting for the lesser of the evils. That's all this is about, because my sole, motive for this election is keeping communism out of New York City. This guy is a radical communist. This would be a disastrous thing for the city. And then the mere
fact... He said, I don't like capitalism in the financial capital of the world.
Oh, yeah. And his housing plan is to take over properties. He doesn't believe in the private ownership of property. Then what does that mean? That means you believe in the government-controlled ownership of property, which is communism, right? So all these policies, if this movement, it's mind-blowing that it's made so much progress. In reality, it's the young generation, right? These kids are coming out of school saddled with student loans. The job market's not great. Inflation's skyrocketed. They can't afford to live. And they're buying into his false narrative of free stuff for everybody. It's not going to happen. You're not going to be able to fund this. Brian, the city is operating at a multiple billion-dollar deficit over the last several years. Where are you coming up with the money besides your fake slogan, tax the rich, tax the rich? It sounds nice in theory. Good luck to you. He's not going to be able to pass 90% of what he's saying, and he's duping this younger generation to believing this nonsense.
Here's the scary thing, and you know local government better than I do, but the city council is as left-wing as him.
Right.
And if Hochul feels as though the momentum that's going to get her reelected would be to go with Mondami's policy. She will raise your taxes. She'll make it. He says this is a good thing. We're just going to have them the same level as New Jersey. Do you know anyone in New Jersey who thinks their taxes aren't too high? Do you know any? And he wants to be more like New Jersey?
Well, I always say when you take it, like as a small business owner, when you take all the expenses that we have, right? You have payroll tax, Social Security, health insurance contributions, unemployment tax, rent tax. When you take all of those, right? And then if you're lucky to take the risk and start a successful business, after all of that, then you're paying over 50% of your income to the government with respect to city taxes, state, and federal, right? So when you take the expenses plus already your tax bracket, you effectively are paying 60-something% to the government as it is. I always tell people, like, from a perspective of a small business owner, who's going to take the risk of starting a business, creating jobs, stimulating the economy, if the burden is going to just keep on increasing? It sounds fine. Oh, 2% here, 2% there, 1% there. When you add it up, this is real money. And it's going to drive people away. It's going to drive people to South Florida. It's going to drive people to Texas. It's going to drive people to Nashville, where they're going to start businesses and their economies are continuing.
Well, they're
to
doing it.
They're doing it.
And it's going to be massive after this. After the pandemic, people just left.
Absolutely.
And during the pandemic, people just left.
That's right.
So you agree that affordability is an issue?
Of course.
So what are some of your ideas to make things more affordable?
The only way to create affordability is by increasing supply. And you have to do so through incentivizing development. You're not going to create affordability by regulating rent regulations.
Just telling people don't charge more, because something's got to give.
Something has to give, because so let me give you a great example, right? You're coming into New York City to buy a building. You want to buy a multifamily building and become a landlord. Now, if you're not going to get an ROI on that, right, then what's the whole purpose of buying a building? No one's going to operate it. Right now, the rent regulations from 2019 have created a tremendous amount of dilapidated housing because landlords have no financial incentive.
What was
for
that?
improving
What was the 2019?
So de Blasio changed the rent regs in New York City in the most drastic measure in city history. And essentially, back in the day, you would be able to renovate a property and amortize part of the expense through increases of rent so you can get an ROI on that. Now, if you were to renovate a property for roughly $50,000, you would increase rents by maybe $20 a month, a sum that's completely nominal and insignificant. So right now, there's two big factors. You have dilapidated housing, and you have about 100,000 shadow inventory units out there in New York City. 100,000 empty units out there that landlords say, I'd rather keep it empty than operate this at the trivial rent that the city's allowing me to charge. Now, when you talk about all these plans, creating housing, development, if I were to provide to you a plan that created 100,000 units in the next few years, you would say that was a brilliant plan.
And they exist.
They exist. That's the thing. Have some basic common sense and some
Are they in areas that are desirable?
Oh, yeah. They're all over New York. They're all over Manhattan, all over New York City, everywhere. Desirable neighborhoods. It just, if you got to a healthy regulatory environment, that alone frees up 100,000 units. And then if you can come up with proper incentives for developers to develop tied to some component of affordable housing, that's how you create it, right? And now we're talking multiple hundreds of thousands of units in the next few years. That then creates an affordability, helps affordability by increasing supply, right? It's really that simple. You have to increase the supply of units if you want to help affordability. Over-regulating an industry just causes turmoil and chaos. It doesn't solve anything.
So when he goes in and says, I want to freeze the rents, does he even know where to start? What do you do? Do you go up to the owner of that building across the street from us and say, this is residential, no, don't raise their rent? I mean, what do you do?
Basically takes every rent-regulated building in the city and says we have rent freezes moving forward.
How many are there? Roughly, what percentage?
About a million rent-regulated units in New York City. And what do we have? I forget the exact number, about 2 million apartments. I don't quote me
half
on that. But
let's say half.
It's a very significant number. Yeah, no. Our stock of rent-stabilized housing in New York City is extraordinarily significant.
So if that happened, what happens to the people that own those buildings?
Oh, that's a fantastic point. Go look at last year. We had Signature Bank collapse. A number of major institutional lenders collapsed because they had a large exposure to multifamily housing.
So they invested with that landlord.
They
bought the building, and they're not able to put the rents to make ends meet. So they walk away from it, and they walk away from their debt.
Yes, and the banks themselves went bankrupt. You had 3 major bankruptcies last year for lending institutions because these buildings went down in value by half. Now, if you have rent freezes, these buildings go down in value to 10 cents on the dollar. Because right now, you've had property insurance premiums go up 4x. Everything's gone up, right? But at the end of the day, the rent freezes will cause an utter chaos in the unstabilized market.
So do you think he plans on using taxpayer dollars to supplement that, to keep landlords whole?
I think that this is a plan for socialized housing. I think it's destruction by design is a phrase that I've been using. I think that he wants to overregulate to create turmoil in the marketplace so the government can come in and take over these properties and create the socialized housing.
The state government or the city government?
I don't know which one.
The federal government won't do that.
Regardless, no, it'd be on a local level. But he's posted videos on this online. He refers to it as the Vienna model, where the government comes in, they create private land trust, they acquire these buildings, and then they create socialized housing. The only way for the government to acquire these buildings through socialized housing is by creating distress in the market through overregulation and buying them at a significant discounts. You do that, you create socialized housing. That's what's called communism.
Can you sue?
God willing.
I mean, can do you have that's not the deal I signed up for? You could have banks.
So when
banks
2019
can talk too, and rent groups can talk. Don't you think so housing associations can rally?
They tried doing this in 2019. They filed a lawsuit with the Supreme Court claiming that de Blasio's rent regulation changes were a quote unquote a taking of property. The suit didn't go anywhere, unfortunately. If you go further this level, I'm concerned whether the suit would prevail. I would hope that everybody got together, but unfortunately right now our court system is very tenant friendly and very left. And I don't think that the landlord lobby is strong enough or has enough support right now to really make the impact that they need to.
Even though they got the money to have the lobbyists and they have the banks to also get involved, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, like you highlighted, unfortunately our leadership has gone very progressive. Right. And that's really causing a huge problem. And I think people have to realize that the negative ramifications.
Would you think if a Brian Moynihan and a Jamie Dimon spoke up and had a press conference to this nature, would it resonate?
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, I'm very disappointed that the leadership in New York City hasn't been more vocal against Mamdani. I don't know how the city hasn't come together with every major corporation CEO.
I think Ken Ackman has, just individual success stories.
Individual, right. But I mean, they should have really come together and formed some kind of, committee.
Do you think it's because Cuomo is so undesirable and people have just saying, well, really, are we doing that much better? Actually, he would be better.
He would be tremendously better. Like I said, it's a vote for less of the evils. And
because the smaller you get, the less politics, the less of an ideologue you can be. You don't really, sometimes you have to think twice. And for Rudy, I had to remind myself a lot of these were Republican. He was just doing the job.
Right.
He was just trying to get the job done. He wasn't acting like a Republican or a Democrat.
Well, I always joke, I go back in the day, nobody cared what you were. Most people don't remember what Bloomberg ran as. You're in 3 terms. People don't remember exactly.
He was a Republican, then an independent, then a Democrat.
Yeah, right. Like most people don't realize that. He was just a good mayor, right?
Yeah.
Giuliani was a fantastic mayor, cleaned up the city. My fear is I don't want to see the city go back to what it was pre-Giuliani.
But you just can't get quality people in there. Pierre Debbas, thanks so much, managing partner of Romer Debbas. Very worried about what's going to happen on Tuesday. Prediction?
My reality, I sadly think he wins, but I'm naive. I'm holding out naive hope.
But the good news is the early voting is a lot of people over 50 showing up, and that's what you would need for a massive upset.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Pierre.
Good to see you. Thank you.
All right. Back in a moment.
They have violated the ceasefire by not giving our hostages back, and they are firing at our troops, all of them against the ceasefire. Israel will enforce the ceasefire. We believe in the ceasefire, but we will enforce it.
Yes, that is the story, the latest in Israel. And right now there was a flare-up over the last few days, but they always go back to a ceasefire in the end. Fundamentally, Hamas is slow-walking. All the hostages remains. We've got 2 more out, down to 11. And you can't get to phase 2 unless you get through phase 1. Actually, in phase 2 is when Hamas is supposed to disarm. In phase 1, they thought we'd be through it already, but it's still problematic. It's going to be tough, but I love the fact that no one can deny there's no raging war. No one can deny all the living hostages are out. That's what changes for Hamas. And the rest of the world's rallying. I'd love to see the Arab world step up and express some outrage when an Israeli soldier is killed. Emily Schrader joins us now, journalist who lives in Tel Aviv, an Israeli human rights activist and author of 10 Things Every Jew Should Know Before They Go to College. Emily, welcome.
Glad to be here.
First off, did you live in Tel Aviv now? Did you ever live here?
Yeah, of course. I'm originally from Los Angeles, but I've lived in Tel Aviv over 10 years now.
What made you go?
I have to say, a lot of the campus anti-Semitism. Didn't intend to talk about that today, but that's the truth. I attended USC for my undergrad, and I experienced some of the same types of bigotry that we've seen today, not quite as extreme, but just a very, very hostile environment for Jewish students on campus.
And this is before all the,
Yeah.
all the uprising after the attack by Hamas. So a lot of people think it just came out of nowhere, but you said it was there?
Absolutely. I mean, this has been an ongoing issue on campuses for many, many years, long prior to October 7th.
Where does it come from?
It's coming primarily from the groups like Students for Justice in Palestine, as well as some other extremist groups. And this group actually has ties, albeit distant, to Muslim Brotherhood. So there is a concerted effort to subvert pro-America and also pro-Israel activism on campus. Now, unfortunately, they are usually targeting Jewish students, not even activists, but Jewish students. And we've certainly seen that in the aftermath of October 7th as well.
I remember UCLA, we covered it live, that these kids were trying to get through, and they just said, "Are you Jewish? You can't walk through." Can't walk through. A campus that you're probably paying tens of thousands of dollars to go to because you're Jewish.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, what we saw with the encampments is really inexcusable. And, we do know from the U.S. government reports that at least some of that was funded in part by the enemies of the United States, the Islamic Republic of Iran. And we've also, of course, seen $6 billion over the past few years be poured into American academia by Qatar. So this is a definite effort to undermine, I think, freedom-loving, liberal values, at least on campuses.
So what was the feeling in Tel Aviv when the hostages came out and when the deal was signed?
Unbelievable sigh of relief collectively from left to right, religious, secular. Every community in Israel felt that. Truly, truly, truly a remarkable day that we weren't sure was going to happen.
And it happened. And that's the main thing. If Hamas continues to act like the terrorist organization they are, the thing is, the gloves are off if you have to go back. You know exactly where to go. You know the tunnels that remain. You actually know how to do the fighting instead of going through training. Now you have a year, 2 years of training to do it. So it's going to be interesting because now we have communication constantly with Jared's over there now, Kushner. We also have Steve Witkoff over there. We have the vice president over there. Now we have the Secretary of State. Actually, you need this type of hands-on, constant vigilance from other than just Hamas and Israel. Is it welcome?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are concerns, primarily because I don't think that anyone in Israel believes that Hamas is actually going to disarm or disband or that they're going to step away from any form of governance. They themselves have stated unequivocally that that's not going to happen. At the same time, I think it's very important that there is an international coalition, that there is leadership on this, holding these parties accountable for the ceasefire, but more importantly, for the long-term well-being of the entire region, for that disarmament of groups like Hamas.
So when you see right now the IDF is where they're supposed to be, and they were still attacked, you said with an RPG, and you said it was one of the soldiers that lost their lives was an American?
Yeah, on Wednesday there was a RPG attack by Hamas terrorists in Gaza. There have been a few skirmishes like this that we've seen since the ceasefire took place. And unfortunately, yes, the soldier who was killed on Wednesday was an American Israeli. Both Yonah Feldbaum is his name. And unfortunately, this isn't surprising. I mean, we have seen actions like this from Hamas violating the ceasefire and trying to sabotage the progress that's been made thus far. And we did see Israel respond to that. And I expect that will be the same if they continue to attack IDF forces.
So Hezbollah is not moving over. They're trying to rearm right now. They're risking the ceasefire there. How close is the Israeli government watching what the developments are? Because the whole point was that Lebanon would say, this group's been diminished severely thanks to Israel's brilliance, and now they could take over Lebanon. Can you imagine Lebanese running Lebanon? But that's not happening yet.
No, it's not, and I think it's something to pay close attention to because it also we can learn from this example when it comes to dealing with Hamas. I mean, the UN Resolution 1559 as well as 1701 called on Hezbollah to withdraw from southern Lebanon, to disarm and to disband. No enforcement, even when billions of dollars, by the way, U.S. taxpayer dollars, were poured into UNIFIL. They didn't do their job. They weren't able to do this.
And that was the peacekeeping group in the area.
That's right.
They were basically complicit with Hezbollah or scared to death of them.
That's right. And that's what we're seeing from Lebanon now. You know, at first the government was saying, yes, we're going to disarm Hezbollah. And now suddenly it's been a rearmament of Hezbollah and they don't really have the power to enforce that ceasefire. And that is extremely dangerous, of course, for Israel, which we're paying close attention to, but also for Lebanese. They shouldn't have to live under effectively an occupation of the Islamic Republic of Iran through their proxy, Hezbollah.
Yeah, we understand too. Intelligence shows Iran is sending them rockets, anti-tank missiles, and artillery, which is unbelievable because their people are starving. And yet they're sending whatever money they have to buy weapons or make weapons and send them over to their proxy groups.
Well, it's disgraceful. I mean, you see the economy in Iran is in free fall. There's 90 million people who effectively are a form of hostages of their own government. There is nothing operating the way that it should inside Iran, and the people are really paying the price. And instead of prioritizing the well-being of their own people, they're sending billions of dollars to terror groups and figuring out ways to evade sanctions instead of just acting as they should, responsible leaders of their country.
How close is the international force to being deployed?
I mean, I think there's a lot of
training
things
in Jordan,
that need to
training in
be
Egypt,
worked out, but there's also debates inside of Israel and even between Israel and the U.S. in terms of who's going to be involved in this. We saw just a few days ago, the Trump administration wanted to have some sort of representation from Qatari forces. That was a hard no from the state of Israel. They vetoed that. I expect those decisions and debates to continue for at least a few more days.
So why would you be against Qatar military?
Well, I think from October 7th through today, we've seen many Qatari officials speak out both sides of their mouth. On the one hand, they want to have good relations with the United States. On the other hand, they are regularly spewing anti-Semitic rhetoric across social media, sometimes even very plainly in English.
Their government or their people?
Government officials, yes. Ambassadors, senior officials. There was just a new one last night that I saw that had been tweeting since October 7th, really crazy things, even endorsing the actions of October 7th. And let's not forget that they've allowed Hamas to have an effective headquarters in Qatar for many, many years. They could have done more sooner. And that's very frustrating, I think, for Israelis because they don't trust Qatar.
By the way, we're talking with Emily Schrader. She's a journalist and Israeli human rights activist here from Tel Aviv. And her book is called 10 Things Every Jew Should Know Before They Go to College. But let's talk about the nations in the Arab world that would be acceptable.
Well, I mean, I think Israel has a longstanding...
We know Indonesia said, well, you need 30,000. Indonesia says, I will supply troops. I don't know anybody else that stepped up. I hear they're training Palestinians and some others in Jordan and in Egypt. What have you heard?
Same thing. So right now we're looking at Jordan and Egypt being the primary contributors in addition to Indonesia. I know that the Trump administration is working very hard to build a much broader coalition that can enforce this. I do think that that's the path forward for Gaza. We don't want to see Israel controlling what's happening in Gaza. They should have their own form of governance, but absolutely we have to get rid of these terror groups, which, by the way, another proxy of the Islamic Republic of Iran, should not be in power of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. I mean, it's just unacceptable, and all the Arab world should be on the same page as that.
Do you think the Arab world really wanted the fighting to end in Gaza? It's pretty clear they did, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, it's hard to tell because a lot of times you see these leaders speaking out both sides of their mouth or something different in English than it would be in Arabic or to their own people. But yeah, of course. I mean, nobody wants to see war. It's a terrible, terrible thing. It's a terrible thing for everyone involved.
But I would say, and you know this better than me, if you talk to an Al-Qaeda fighter, an ISIS fighter, Hamas, and Hezbollah, they like war.
Sure, but that's not the same thing as a state. You know, when we're talking about Egypt, Jordan, even Qatar, any of these countries, with the exception, I will say, of the Islamic Republic of Iran, most of these countries are not keen to start big wars, even for causes they very much believe in.
See, that's what I think that's happened over the last 10 years. I think these leaders are trying to lift their economies. I think they really are. And Saudi Arabia is probably the most amazing story that I've seen. The fact that they care about entertainment, that they care about, they're trying to get their people to do things. They're trying to give their women stuff that we take for granted, I guess, because everybody should be equal. But the things they're allowing women to do now, walk around in Western style clothing, being able to drive in these things. I mean, we were told that was never going to change. And this prince has seemed to have done a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the progress in Saudi Arabia is truly remarkable, and I'm very hopeful there'll be peace between Israel.
I think they want to sign a deal with you, don't you?
I sure hope so. Yeah, I know it's been in discussions for a long time. In fact, it was one of the reasons that Hamas wanted to do the October 7th massacre. They wanted to throw a wrench in that expansion of the Abraham Accords. I'm hopeful that they will not be successful and that moving forward we can continue to see that. I know it's a main priority also of the Trump administration to push forward this initiative of expanding the Abraham Accords, whether it be with Saudi Arabia or Indonesia. I know that Israel is on board for anyone who wants to make peace with Israel. We're willing to make peace with them.
So let's talk about some things that parents should know before they send their Jewish kids to college.
Well, I think the most important thing is that people are prepared with the basic information and even the terminology, which is something I spoke about in the book quite a bit, that people don't know the difference between terms like the West Bank or Judea and Samaria. They don't know that Judea and Samaria is the actual historic name of that territory, and that, in fact, the West Bank means the West Bank of the Jordan River, referring to Jordan, not a historic state of Palestine or anything like that. And I don't say that to minimize anything for Palestinians, but because when a student goes to campus and they get these things thrown at them that may or may not be true, because a lot of people don't know what they're talking about, yet they speak with such confidence. These students who are not, experts in international law, they don't know what that means. They don't know what the connotations are. They don't know who the players are on this issue. And you shouldn't have to have a law degree to be able to have a conversation with people on campus. And unfortunately, that was my experience. You have to be...
You're about engagement.
Yeah.
So instead of just say, you take these people on.
Absolutely.
Verbally.
Absolutely. And it doesn't mean you have to even have a debate, but have a conversation, an educated conversation where you can speak honestly about these things no matter what side of the issue you're on.
Give me some more. For example, who was there first?
Well, I think when it comes to who was there first, it's not really debatable. I mean, I know they would like to debate it, but of course, the Jewish people, where they are from is Judea and Samaria. It is the land of Israel. That is where they became a people. And honestly, I mean, the Palestinians that we know today, the Arab Palestinian people, came as colonizers to the first time in that region. So that is the history. Now, that doesn't mean they don't have a right to exist or anything else today, but historically speaking, it's unquestionable who was there first.
Mm-hmm. Looking back now with the Oslo Accords, would that have been a disaster had Yasser Arafat said yes? What do you think? In the 90s?
It's hard to say. I mean, he kind of did say yes and then no, and backtracked on that issue, and then ultimately we saw the second Intifada. It could have worked if there was a viable leadership that was ready to teach peace. And this is the core thing that's missing even until today, that even if there was a Palestinian leader who said, okay, let's move on from this history of rejectionism and violence and all of the things that we've seen over the past 70 some years, the public won't accept it. And this is the problem with a highly, highly radicalized society. And that's why you saw criticism actually from Palestinians of Yasser Arafat for even agreeing in the first place to the Oslo Accords. And that's something really important to note. We have to teach future generations that Israel has a right to exist and vice versa. Otherwise, we're not going to get anywhere in the long term.
And that would have connected Gaza and the West Bank, and they would have had some type of tunnel or bridge to both lands, correct? And a portion of Jerusalem?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that has been offered, land swaps for certain areas.
I don't think Israel would ever go for that now.
I don't think so either, just in terms of security.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in a very different reality today. Also with the intervention of, as I mentioned, the Islamic Republic and all the proxy terror groups that they're working on. I mean, they've been trying to infiltrate the Jordan border to attack Israel from that side as well. Even now there's discussion of the proxies of the regime that are in Iraq coming into Israel to invade, not just with missiles, but also trying to get through Jordan to invade Israel. So this is a very, very serious threat. And I don't think that Israel's in a position to give some of the concessions that they previously were willing to give simply because of security.
Does Netanyahu get reelected?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, we'll have to see. It depends. Honestly, it depends on the day how popular Netanyahu is. Right now, I saw the polls even this morning were saying that the opposition would win pretty steadily if the election were held today. But he does seem to be somewhat of a magician electorally. It seems that every time we go to elections, something happens and he's able to come out ahead again. So we'll have to see.
All right. Emily Schrader, pick up her book, 10 Things Every Jew Should Know Before They Go to College, anywhere. Emily, thanks so much.
Thanks.